Today I welcome fellow Canadian and award-winning author J.M. Frey, author of the New York Times Best Romances of the Year listed book, Time and Tide. This is the Brewing Fiction Podcast. Hey, good morning, Jess. Welcome to the Brewing Fiction Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And you're joining me from Toronto area today. So
From Toronto.
Toronto, and I'm in Saskatchewan, so we're Canadian neighbors. Well,
at least one province between us.
That's all, right? Yeah.
That's all. Never mind that it takes 15 hours to drive outside of my province to the next province.
So I'm from Newfoundland originally and driven across Canada a couple of times. And I love the drive except Ontario. Northern Ontario goes on forever.
And it's boring. They talk about like Saskatchewan and Manitoba being flat, but at least you can see the horizon. In Ontario, it's just like service stations and trees.
Yeah, forever. 2 days to get across the province.
Yeah. And no one's cutting through the states these days.
No. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to step right into Author's Corner, and that's where you get to tell me a little bit about yourself. I noticed that you have yourself called an elapsed academic. So I want you to explain that to me because I have no idea what that means, and then you'll tell me all the other good stuff as well.
Basically, it means that I didn't finish my PhD. So I got my undergrad in dramatic literature and with an undeclared minor in classical mythology because I went to acting school. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a voice actor, and I am now. Okay. Yeah. But, starving artist doesn't pay the bills. So I went back to school and I got my master's in communications and culture in a joint program. And basically my area of expertise is online tribes, basically sociology, but the sociology of online. And the online tribes that I focused on were fandom. So I wrote my thesis on Mary Sue fan fiction. I presented papers on cosplay, stuff like that. Comics, superheroes, heroes in 9/11, those sorts of topics. And then I was offered a full ride for my PhD. And couldn't really think of a topic that I wanted to spend the next 6 years and half a fortune on. And was like, maybe I'll just write a book. And then I did.
You did.
And then it was published.
A number of books.
Yeah. And then it was Publisher's Weekly Best Book of the Year. Yeah, which makes it sound a lot easier than it was. But around the time that I got the offer for my full ride, I also got my first publication offer. So it was sort of like, I'd love to focus on academia, but I want to see where this path goes for a little while.
So were you writing throughout university or even through high school and the publication following your last?
I started writing fan fiction in 1991.
Okay.
Before Archive of Our Own existed. Thank you for that, Astolat. Bless you. Before Schnoogle existed, before fanfiction.net existed, before LiveJournal existed, I was writing in Yahoo groups.
Wow.
And some of the
friends... You don't look that old. You don't look
I have really good genetics.
Do you? Okay.
My grandmother beat me up the side of a live volcano when she was 78 years old.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. So, I started writing fan fiction in 1991 on Yahoo groups. Yeah. And I actually haven't stopped. Even now that I'm writing professionally, I still write fan fiction for fun to keep my skills sharp, to keep my creativity elastic, because I have something I want to say about the show or the comic that I'm enjoying, or just because it's fun. It's just fun. It's good play. In the same way that an NHL hockey player might go out onto the street and play a game of shinny.
Right.
I like writing fan fiction and reading fan fiction still. And then from there, it was in university. Someone said to me, you don't suck at this. Maybe you could try writing an original novel. And I was taking screenwriting classes and I was taking playwriting classes because obviously I was doing a dramatic literature degree.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'll try to write a book. And the first book I wrote was not awesome. It's buried underneath a tree in my parents' yard, so it can stay there. But then between my undergrad and my master's degree, I moved overseas to do some work to just pay off my student debt, and I got hit by a car while I was there. I had nothing to do but lay on my back and heal for 6 months, and I was like, okay, well, now's the time to write a book if I'm going to write a book. And I did. And yeah, and that's the one I got the offer on when I was doing my master's. So I was doing my master's degree, doing physiotherapy, came back to Canada, like did the master's degree, did physiotherapy, did surgery, finished the book. Because again, it was like, I'm laying on my back for 6 months. What else am I going to do?
Right. Well, that's certainly a different path. There's so many different stories when I'm talking to authors, and yours is just as amazing as everybody else's.
Well, it's I think there is sort of a pipeline from actor to screenwriter to novelist. Like I think it's something that a lot of people ignore, but when people say, what's the best thing I could possibly do for my art as a writer, I say, go join community theater.
Yeah.
Learn how to improv, learn how to act, learn how to embody a different character, learn how different characters speak differently. And I would say that having started as a child actor and then gone to school for acting and gone to school for dramatic literature and learning how to write stories for different mediums, I think it's the most important thing that's ever happened to me as a writer.
Okay.
I think it's what's made me a writer.
Being so knowledgeable and so character focused, would you say that your novels are heavily character focused as well?
Absolutely. I think each one is a character study.
Nice.
With plot.
All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but first we're going to have a little bit of fun. All right.
Woo-hoo.
So we're going to do what's called Fast Five. I'm going to throw 2 words at you, and you have to tell me which is your favorite. Your favorite, is it coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
It's because you can do more with it. Tea is just, I mean, I enjoy tea. I'm actually drinking a London Fog right now.
Okay.
But
yeah.
Coffee you can do more with. You can change the flavor, you can change the consistency, you can change how strong it is. It's just more versatile, that's all.
Fair. All right. So you're a science fiction and fantasy writer. So if you were to choose between J.R.R. Tolkien or George R.R. Martin, what would you choose?
Ursula K. Le Guin. Diana Wynne Jones. Now I have to choose. I would choose Tolkien because I like his world building better.
Yeah. Have you read those 2?
I read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I was given The Hobbit I didn't come from a household of readers. Okay. So as soon as I could read books for myself, my parents stopped reading me bedtime stories. Like, it's not that books were derided. It just, there wasn't a big book culture in my home.
Fair.
And I was given The Hobbit by a British schoolmate for like my grade 4, grade 5 birthday.
Yeah.
So that's like 11 or 12 years old. Read the first chapter, did not understand what was happening, put it on a shelf. Many, many, many years later, went to university. And in my first year of university, went to go see a movie with someone. And the first trailer came out. The first Lord of the Rings trailer came out. And it was the silhouette of the Fellowship going over the mountain with that da 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 da. And the guy I was with grabbed my arm so hard, I had bruises the next morning. And he made a noise that was pornographic. Like, he sounded... And I was just like, what is this property that you are so excited about? Yeah. And he was trying to explain it to me, and I was like, I don't know, that sounds boring. But we went to go watch the movie.
Yeah.
And after we finished watching the movie, I came home and I was like, wait a minute, I think I have the prequel to this. And I read The Hobbit all in one night. And I was like, oh, okay, now I understand what this was. Because no one explained to me that, like, it was an alternate world, that there were elves. So if you don't understand the tropes of fantasy, then the books make no sense. Now I love them.
Yeah. So would you say that may have been the start of the love for fantasy at that point?
No, I fantasy television, Dracula
Okay.
the series, Forever
Yeah.
Knight, um, the Power Rangers. There's stuff
Hmm.
like that where
Okay.
there's this magical element to Sailor Moon. I mean, honestly, if we had to pinpoint something, I would say
Yeah.
Sailor Moon was the beginning of my love of fantasy.
Okay. That's my daughter's favorite show as well. Are you an iOS user or an Android user?
Android.
Good for you. Yeah.
I don't know. Being tied to one scares me.
I had an iPod, right? It seems so long ago, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
I went with iPhone 4 and then I switched to Samsung and I've been Android ever since. So,
You can pry my Blackberry out of my cold, dead hands. I miss it. I just miss having the physical keyboard because I used to, like on the commute, I could thumb type pretty
yeah.
quick. So I would write whole scenes on my commute on my way to my day job on my Blackberry.
Wow.
And I can't do that now on a
Yeah.
touch phone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
quite the same for sure.
And also, I have from that same accident vision loss.
Oh.
So it's quite frustrating to try to figure out a touch screen. It's so much nicer to have a physical
Mm.
keyboard
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's a black spot in my vision, and I can't always see what I'm touching.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Blackberry, come back.
Hey, old Blackberry. Okay. I know you're a Star Trek fan. So I'm going to ask you, did you like original series or Next Generation better?
Next Generation.
Because you have a bit of a crush on Will Wheaton, do you not?
I love that I've said this in enough interviews that I don't
Yeah.
even have to say it. You already know it.
Everybody knows, right?
Everybody already knows. Yeah, but he's a happily married man, so
Oh, crushes
I
are
I
innocent
can I can,
enough.
I
Yeah,
can just I can continue to admire him from afar.
absolutely. He's a good guy
Yeah.
from what I've read about him.
Everyone I've spoken to says he's a good guy. So
Yeah, yeah. So Next Generation. Did you watch original series at all when you were younger?
no, Next
No.
Generation was on Friday nights. So
Hmm.
Friday nights was family pizza, Star Trek, and then a
Gotcha.
movie because my father owned a video rental shop. Um,
Okay.
that's how old I am. Um,
Again, you don't look that old.
thank you.
Our listeners can't see you, but yeah, you don't.
It's the baby cheeks. um yeah, so I have watched some TOS, but I will admit I have never sat down and watched all of it.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know that I've watched every episode either. I was pretty young at that time, but
Yeah.
Next Generation I watched right from when it started to when it ended.
I remember the final episode of Star Trek The Next Generation being such a big deal that I
Yeah.
was like on my knees begging my parents to let me go to the Sky Dome and
Oh,
watch it because they did it in Toronto
wow.
it's the Rogers Center now, but it is forever the
Right.
Sky Dome,
Yeah.
on the Jumbotron. So that's for those who don't know, the Sky Dome is the stadium where the Toronto Blue Jays play baseball, and they filled that stadium with Star Trek nerds, and they played
Wow.
the final episode on the Jumbotron, and I begged to go, and I was too young, and I understand why they said no, but I resented it for a little while. Yeah,
All right. And last question for Fast Five: paperback or ebook for reading?
paperback.
Paperback.
Specifically because I like to read near or in water.
Okay.
On the beach,
Probably a
on
good
the boat,
idea.
in the
Yeah.
bath.
Yeah. Cool. So do you still read a lot? I mean, I know you talked about a little bit of vision loss there, but do you read a lot or do you listen to a lot of audiobooks now?
I don't find I do either.
Okay.
I and this is a problem. This is actually something I'm trying to deal with. Is I have a really hard time turning off my author brain.
Hmm.
Um, so it takes me months and months and months to read a book, even if I'm super engaged in it, because I'll be reading and then the author will have chosen a word and I'll go, "Oh, that word does not mean what you think it means," or "Oh, that doesn't work here," or "That is not the character choice I would have made." And it's not that I'm judging the book. I'm not saying the book is bad. I'm just I cannot turn off my damn brain.
Right.
and I
So
have a
you're rewriting. You're
I'm
rewriting the
rewriting
book
the
as
book
you're
as I'm
reading
reading
it.
it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a really hard time with professionally published fiction, indie
Yikes.
fiction, like because I really struggle with turning my brain off. And then the genres that I don't write in are a lot easier. So I read more nonfiction than I read anything else. But then, of course, I read nonfiction and I think this would make a really great novel. And then I start a novel. And then the other problem is, of course, there are only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
And every time I sit down with someone else's book, I think, ugh, I should be working on mine.
Doing your own? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I'm lucky enough that I get to drive a lot for my job. So I listen
Mm.
to audiobooks 3, 4, 5 hours every day, Monday to Friday.
Oh,
So
nice.
I do get to read in quotation marks a lot of
Yeah.
fiction. So
My commute's just too short and too broken up. It's on the train, off the train, on the train, up the stairs, down the stairs, on the train, off the train. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing.
fair enough. Well, that was Fast Five. Great conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start over now with let's go back way back to when you started your journey as a writer. Why don't you give us a little history lesson on when that actually happened for you?
Okay. Well, as I said, I started writing fan fiction in 1991.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that very much. I still have the printed out Sailor Moon fan fiction that my friend and I wrote in high school that we
Yeah.
illustrated and photocopied. And it was just a hobby. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. And I
Yeah.
never became a big name fan. I was never the biggest in a fandom, but I had a nice little following. And more importantly, I had friends and we read each other's work. And it really honed me as a writer, specifically because I knew about what topics I wanted to talk about, but also how to take critique, how to take feedback, how editing works, how to take abusive comments, how to deal with flamers, how to deal with trolls. Like I learned a lot in fan fiction. And
Okay.
then again, it was just one of my university friends was like, "Are you ever going to write something original? Because you're not bad at this."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, I suppose so. I'll try." And again, I wrote a novel over the course of that year. Around then is when I discovered National Novel Writing Month.
Oh, okay.
Rest in peace. Um, so it was. I think they started in 2002. So I must have done my first year in 2003.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, so that was a really nice push where it was like, oh, this is how long books are. Obviously, 50,000 words does not a novel make, but
Right.
50,000
Right.
words in 1 month
A
is
pretty
good
good start.
practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I ended up writing probably about 10 books with Nano, and um, somewhere in the middle of all of that, I was like, well, I graduated with a dramatic literature degree, moved overseas, found a writing group in Japan. We were editing each other's books, doing Nano together. It was just a
Yeah.
bunch of English speakers who lived in
Oh,
my
okay.
rural area.
Yeah.
Um, and someone said, "So, what are you going to do with these stories?" And I said, "I don't know. What does one do with a story? How does one get published?"
Yeah.
And that was the early days of the internet. I mean, not early days. It wasn't the 90s, but it was still one of those things where Query Tracker didn't exist. Manuscript Wishlist didn't exist. If you wanted to know what agents existed in the world, you had to go to the bookstore and buy the book that comes out every year
Right.
with the
Right. Yeah.
agent listing, with their what they want, where to send the manuscript. You had to print the whole book out and freaking mail it to people. Like it
Right.
was it was a
Can you
thing.
imagine? Yeah. Right. I said it earlier. It just seems so long ago.
But that was 2001.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I did all of that. I sent it to a bunch of agents. I sent it to a bunch of small presses, and fortuitously, I was at a science fiction convention here in Toronto, and with a bunch of actor friends and a bunch of people I knew from the Space Network, Space
Yeah.
Channel,
Yeah.
and I was invited up to a room party, and we were just sitting on the bed drinking beer, and I was talking to one of my author friends, and I said, I can't, I don't know why no one wants this book. I'm really proud of it. It's nobody wants gay alien threesomes. And from across the room, someone went, I do. And she came over and she introduced herself, and she turned out to be the acquiring manager of what was at the time the preeminent independent science fiction and fantasy publisher in Canada.
Yeah.
And I sent her the book and she rejected it.
Oh,
And she
I thought
said,
that was. I
no,
thought you were just good. That was the good news. Okay.
no, she rejected it. And I've actually spoken to her afterwards and I said, why? And she said, there were problems in the book that I didn't think you were able to fix, which
Oh,
is why I rejected it. I loved the characters, I loved the writing, but I didn't think you could fix the problems. So what I said to her is, give me a list of the problems.
Yeah.
And I'll fix them. And she said, I don't think you can, but here's the list. So I took half a year and I fixed them and I sent them back. And she let it sit on her slush pile for 3 months because she was scared to have to say no to me. She read it. She went, oh my God, she fixed the problems. And then they offered on it.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
Perseverance. Once you're rejected, a lot of people would say, okay, just another rejection. Add it to the pile, right?
Yeah, but I was a child actor. So from the age of 4, I have learned that rejection is not personal. It's not about me as an actor. It's not about it. Natalie Dormer says this really great thing on interviews, which I have taken to heart as both an actor and as a writer, which is it's not about you. It's not about your talent. It's not about how good a writer you are or how good an actor you are. Is when you walk in that audition room, the people sitting at the other end of that table, they want you to be the solution to their problem. They want you to be the solution to their problem more than you want to be the solution to their problem. And it's the same with an editor or an agent opening up the slush box inbox, right? They want, there's a gap in their list. There's a problem. They want you to be the solution to that problem more than you want to be the solution. But you're not. And you know what? If the puzzle piece is shaped like this and your manuscript is shaped like that, it has nothing to do with you. As an actor, if you walk in and they've already cast everybody in the family and everybody in the family has blue eyes, and you walk in and you have brown eyes, it has nothing to do with you.
For sure.
You're just you just don't fit the hole they need to put the piece in. So yeah, 64 rejections before I placed Triptych was nothing.
A lot of writers say the same thing. Don't take it personal. You're going to have a lot of rejections. Learn
and
how to
it's hard
take it.
to listen to that and then actually feel it, because as an actor, you're putting your body and your voice and your soul out there. As a writer, you're dumping your heart and your soul onto the keys. It feels personal. You know, when people say this main character is annoying and you're like, oh, I gave the main character my favorite traits of myself. Are you saying that I'm annoying? It's very, of course we take it personally because art is personal.
Fair.
But publishing's a business.
Great way of putting it, Jess. Okay, why don't you tell me a little bit about your latest novel, Time and Tide? It's named now, correct?
Yes, now it's called Time and Tide.
So give us the whole scoop on Time and Tide.
What, the history of it, or?
Yeah, I have a question a little bit later, but let's do it all together because you've published quite a bit, and now you've got a lot of books back in print, and some titles were retitled, and on and on and on. So you have the mic to tell us your history here because it sounds very intriguing.
So I will tell you with this book, it was after I wrote Triptych and I sold Triptych, while Triptych was on submission and I was trying to query it, all the advice says just write the next book. So the next book I wrote was First Impressions. For those who know, First Impressions was the original title of Pride and Prejudice. And it was, the idea of it was going to be that a girl, because I love time slip stories. Triptych is a time slip story.
Right.
And I really love meta narratives. So that's why I wrote my master's degree on Mary Sue fiction, fan fiction. I really love stories where the main character is aware of the story that they're in, which is why I love like Diana Wynne Jones's The Original Howl's Moving Castle, because like Sophie is aware of the tropes of medieval inspired fantasy and she tries to live her life based on them. So I love stories like that. And I thought, how fun would it be to have like the ultimate Jane Austen nerd fall into a Jane Austen world and accidentally screw up everything. Mr. Darcy is going to marry Catherine Morland, and just messes everything up, and then has to fix it all by the end. And I thought, what a fun romp this is going to be. And I wrote the first couple chapters, and I shared them with my writing group. And my friend who lived in Great Britain said, this sounds like a TV series that just premiered last night called Lost in Austin. And I
No
went,
way.
what? Yeah. This ITV series, Lost in Austin, just came out. And I was like, God damn it. So
How does that happen?
so I scrapped that idea. And I was like, I still want to write like my Jane Austen book, though. Because I love Jane Austen, looking back at it, from 200 years from now, or 200 years later, and seeing how it's still so relevant.
Right.
I love all of that. So I was still quite interested in writing a Regency era book or a Jane Austen book. And it's interesting. Tanya Huff once said the reason she started writing vampire books is because vampire fans will buy anything with a vampire in it. Doesn't matter how good it is or how stupid the idea is. Vampire fans will buy anything with a vampire in it. And I thought, Jane-ites are kind of like that. There's 100,000,000 Jane Austen adaptations out there, and we always want the next one, and we will always read the next one. So I thought, okay, this feels like a good business decision to stay with a Jane Austen idea.
Okay.
And then I ended up going out to Cardiff to do some stuff with the BBC. And while I was out there, I toured the Jane Austen Centre in Bath, and I found out that there are very few surviving letters from Jane Austen because her sister burned about 3,000 of them after she died. Okay. And the reason for that was Jane Austen originally published anonymously, but by near the end of her life, it was an open secret that she was the author of these books. And she was starting to get famous and starting to get known. And when she died, Cassandra was just like, my sister's personal thoughts and personal life are my sister's business and mine, nobody else's. And she burned the letters. I found that fascinating. But what I found more fascinating is that Jane Austen never married, despite writing 6 books about the importance of needing to marry for economic safety and social safety. And preferably for love, but not every character gets to do that. Mm-hmm. And she was very pragmatic, and she actually had a fantastic proposal from a man who was big in the neighborhood. That's a funny pun because his last name was Big Withers. She accepted it that evening. He proposed. He was a family friend. He proposed. She accepted it. She and Cassandra went up to bed. They talked all night. They came down in the morning, having not slept, and Jane said, actually, no, thank you. And a lot of people think Cassandra talked her out of it because she was like, you're a good writer, but if you become a wife and a mother and a mistress of a great household, you will have no time to write. So what's more important to you? But the other thing I found out is that Jane Austen lived with her best friend, Martha Lloyd, her whole life. They met each other when they were kids. They were neighbors. After Jane Austen's father gave up his parish and moved to Bath with his wife and his 2 unmarried daughters, Martha Lloyd moved in with them. And then the dad died, and she stayed. And then they moved to cheaper accommodations, and she stayed. Mm-hmm. And then they moved to cheaper accommodations again, and she stayed. And then they moved into Chawton Cottage, which was given to them by Jane's brother when he came into his wealth. And Martha Lloyd stayed. And then Jane Austen died, and Martha Lloyd married Francis Austen, her little brother. And I was just like, And they were roommates. Is this why Cassandra Austen burned 3,000 letters? Is this why Jane Austen never married? And obviously we can only ever speculate. Right. But it feels very much like that. So I thought, there's a story I want to tell.
Made a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. And I started writing it, and then I was like, I want to respect Jane Austen's life and legacy. I'm not going to write a fiction novel about her being a raging lesbian. So I'm just going to make a fictional character. So I made Margaret Goodenough as this analogy for Jane Austen. And then because I love time travel and I love meta narratives, I added the main character who's from the 21st century, who actually knows nothing about Margaret Goodenough. And in that way, explores what it meant to be queer in the Regency era. And
Okay.
yeah. So long story short, that's how I came up with the idea for it.
Yeah.
But that's the second book I wrote, and I gave it to my first agent. After Triptych came out, I signed with an agent. I gave him as the next thing for him to publish. He didn't understand it. He was like, I don't get it. It's not historical fiction, but it's not tropey enough to be mainstream historical romance. I don't really see what you're doing here. Is it science fiction? Is it... Because I've never really driven down the center of any one genre. I tend to blend them. So he didn't really get it, and he wanted me to make it simpler or make it more complicated or something. And in the end, he was just like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't want to rep it. And I was like, that's fine. So then I didn't stay with him very long, moved on to a second agent, gave it to her, and same thing. She was like, it's not bad. I just don't know what it is. And again, publishing is a business. So I can pour my heart and soul into a piece of art, but they have to package that art into a product that's going to sell.
Right.
And the book was too genre blendy and people didn't really understand it. So I said, okay, well, if you're not going to publish it, or if you're not going to submit it for publication, there's this new app that's just opened, that's just come into existence, called Wattpad.
Right.
I was working for the Writers Guild at the time. I went to go to an event. The creators of Wattpad did a talk. I signed up for Wattpad. I think I was in, one of the early adopters. And I was like, can I just put it on Wattpad and see how it goes? And she was like, yeah, sure. And by then, this was, the book was almost 10 years old at this point. So I put it on Wattpad, very little editing, just there it is. It did okay, but it wasn't fan fiction, so people didn't really know what it was.
Right.
And one day I got a little pop-up that said, your book is eligible for a Waddy Award. Would you like to submit? And I was like, yeah, okay, click. And then I heard nothing. And then like 6 months later, I got an email saying, congratulations, you won. Oh, okay, cool, thanks. So I said to Wattpad, what did I win? And they said, oh, well, a certificate and a nice little badge for your profile and access to this forum and access to our teaching modules about how to be a better writer. And I was like, all right, thank you. But I'm aware that you guys are opening a publishing arm. Do you want it for the arm? And they said, no, we're only doing YA. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'm going to take it elsewhere then. So I had a couple of exclusivity periods with a couple of different reading apps, because after Wattpad, a whole bunch of other mimic apps came into existence. Of
course. Yeah.
So I got exclusive deals with each of those. I got paid on each of those. And by then we had changed the name. So it had started at First Impressions. I posted it on Wattpad as A Woman of the Sea. It moved to Radish, and they renamed it The Woman Who Fell Through Time. And once I was finished with all these exclusivity periods, I went back to Wattpad and said, do you want it? And they, not yet. I said, okay. So I self-published it as A Woman of the Sea.
Yeah.
Thought nothing else. 2 years go by, and I get an email from Wattpad. Okay, we're ready for it now. So I take it down from everywhere, sign a contract with W by Wattpad Books, which by then was their adult line. They had by then opened an adult line. Reached out to me and said, we don't have a historical yet for this new line. Would you like to be our tentpole historical? Obviously, the answer is yes. I worked with an amazing editor. We changed the name to Time and Tide. Beautiful new cover. Completely rewrote the back half of the book. And that's where we are. Now it's on the New York Times Best Romances of the Year list.
It is, yes, indeed. And here's a short clip from Time and Tide by J.M. Frey.
As I was still in my PJs, Fenton stood carefully outside the door. He lingered just long enough to tell me that he'd managed to sell my old smartphone for an obscene amount to some fascinated science kook in London. It was far more than I ever would have earned in prizes, he said. More than enough for my needs. I think perhaps you are very proud, Samantha, but I beg you to take this along with my deepest thanks. He held out a leather pouch that clinked softly when I accepted it. "You know I don't know what this is worth," I told him. "It's enough to purchase some clothing of your own, to pay for your share of the meals and carriages until the wedding, and for several months of your lodging with my sisters and mother. It will tide you over comfortably. I could give you more, if you desire. This is enough. As soon as I start teaching, I'll be self-sufficient." "It was your little device, after all." "It was a gift, Fenton. Shut up and accept it." He dimpled at me. "I do so enjoy your turns of phrase." I snorted. "Right. Now, get out. I'm practically naked." "Lucky, then, that I have managed to winkle a spare dress out of Miss Gale's lady's maid," Daisy said, appearing over Fenton's shoulder. "You are dismissed, little bird." "Aye, aye, Commodore," Fenton said, tossing off a rigid salute and marching away like a toy soldier. "Our room has turned into a town square." I stepped aside so Daisy could come in. "Feels like everybody's dropped by today." "Nearly everyone," Daisy said. "The linen draper has arrived and is downstairs. I could invite him up if you like." "Yeah, I'll pass," I said, as I skimmed out of my dressing gown. What is a linen draper?" Daisy gave me another of those pinning me to a corkboard looks before shaking her head a little in disbelief. "A seller of cloth. Here is a chemise for you. Quick now, turn, and I shall tie off your stays and dress." As she did, she lingered at the nape of my neck, the soft skin inside my elbow, the vulnerable tops of my feet as she checked the length. I tensed to suppress a shiver. She didn't mean it like that, no matter how much I wanted her to mean it like that. "Are you much recovered from your queer turn?" At some point, I was going to have to stop finding people using the word queer that way funny. Today was not that day, though, and I snorted. Taking it to mean something deeper, Daisy gave the ties at the back of my dress one final tug and stepped away. When I turned to face her, she was staring out the window, stiff-backed and pouting. "Daisy? Are you okay?" "Have I done something amiss?" "What?" Daisy gestured at her writing desk, which she had closed up into a case and tucked beside her trunk. "You have spent all morning behaving oddly around me, and I suspect it is due to that." "No," I said. I mean, yes, but no, there's nothing wrong." She whirled to face me, fists clenched and fire in her eyes. "Then what, pray tell me, do you find so distasteful? You call my writing good, and yet you are overcome with nerves from just a few paragraphs. I know it is not a ladylike pastime, and you say that you eschew such rigid roles in society, yet you behave as if my hobby offends you. You call me friend, but share secrets with my brother that you will not disclose to me. You find my proximity uncomfortable. You shrink from my touch. You disdain to share a bed with me, sleeping all the way against the wall or on the furthest edge. Yet you stare at me when I speak, as if I am a greater orator than any yet who'd lived. You bewilder me, Samantha Franklin." I confused her? Ha! "Daisy, honestly, I don't know how to explain it." "Please, try," Daisy begged, and the way she said it curled around my heart like a lover's fingers. I do not know what I want, only that I cannot bear to lose your regard over my scribbling." "I swear you haven't," I promised. I held out my hands and she gripped them immediately. "It's amazing what you do. I know how fiercely you have to carve out and defend your time, your right to do it, and I think it's incredible." "Then why do you recoil?" Because... Oh, fuck. I was going to do it. I was going to kiss her. I slid my hands up her arms, cupped her shoulders, rolled up onto my tiptoes. Daisy's mouth parted in confusion, then in surprise as I leaned closer and tilted my head, then
in anticipation as she understood what I meant to do. Her tongue was a pink, wet flash against her bottom lip, her spun gold lashes fluttering as we— "Daisy!" Marigold called from the hall, harsh and sudden. We startled apart. "Hasten yourself!" Marigold added when Daisy's only reply was a grumble. "Miss Eliza seeks your opinion on the twill stuff." I threw back my head and laughed because, of course, Daisy's annoyance broke like a wave upon the shore. She huffed a chuckle more amused with my amusement than the interruption, but made for the door. Okay. So we weren't talking about it. Cool. Cool. Yeah. I could do not talking about it. Shit.
So a long journey, but perseverance, I guess, pays off.
Yeah. Well, I think I started working. I started writing this book in 2010.
Imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we label this as your favorite thus far then? Of your own work?
No.
No?
You're not supposed to have, or parents don't have favorites. Parents don't have favorite children, but my favorite thing I've ever written is a short story called The Maddening Science,
Okay.
which is about a former supervillain saves the life of his stalker and realizes that his stalker is the daughter of the superhero who originally put him away. And I think it would make a great feature film. Right. But I haven't been able to shape it that way. And I would really love to make a novel length version of it. But I just can't get at it the way that I want to. So it still hasn't quite come together.
So you wrote it as a short story, submitted it anywhere?
Yeah, it was actually, I wrote it, I was asked to write it. So that same editor that signed Triptych put together a couple of anthologies called When the Hero Comes Home and When the Villain Comes Home. And the idea is that these stories take place in the last quarter of the hero's journey. All of these stories for this anthology had to be the hero has gone out into the world. Luke Skywalker has become a Jedi. He's blown up the Death Star, and now he's returning to Tatooine. And you have to write that story about him coming back.
Okay.
So people did these really great stories about like marauding orcs coming back and opening up coffee shops and all this stuff. So the story that I did for Hero was King Arthur is reborn to save Albion in its moment of greatest need. And then you realize through his prophetic dreams that he's going to score the winning goal at the World Cup for Team England. And then they were like, okay, so we've done heroes. Let's do villains now. Can you write us a story about a villain coming home? Yeah. And so that's where I wrote The Maddening Science. I wrote it specifically for the call for Ed Greenwood and Gabrielle Harbowy.
Nice.
Yeah.
So no favorites, but that's your favorite.
But that's my favorite. And if I had to pick a favorite novel, then it's definitely The Untold Tale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, you've also written under a pseudonym, correct?
Yes. Peggy Barnett.
Peggy Barnett. Share a little bit about that. So I'm always intrigued about someone using a pseudonym. For me, I want my name and I want to be me. I want to be known as me and I want my name to be out there. So writing it under a pseudonym takes that away. So talk to me about that.
Yes and no. They were a lot more separated before. They're only nominally separated now. I've reissued some of the books with J.M. Frey writing as Peggy Barnett on the covers.
Fair. Okay.
But what happened is that I ended up writing a YA novel, and it just came out YA. And I have to admit, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I will never write another YA novel. Okay. I have never written a middle grade novel. I have friends who write middle grade novels, and I'm like, I don't know how you tell the same amount of story as I do. I do 130,000 words. They do 40,000 words. How do you do that? It's so hard. And then, of course, I know, the middle grade writers look at me and say, I don't know how you write 130,000 words. How do you get that much story?
Yeah.
So they're all different skill sets and they're all different preferences, but I decided to try writing in YA, wrote one duology and thought, nah, I'm done. This is too hard. I'm not enjoying this the way that I hoped I would.
Okay.
But because I had done that, the erotica work needed a pseudonym because I didn't want 13-year-olds to accidentally find Lips Like Ice. And those books really just came about because, again, that same editor from Triptych messaged me out of the blue. She was editing an anthology of erotica stories,
Okay.
transhumanist erotica stories. And she said, I have a gap in this list of stories that I need. And the sex scenes that you write in your books are really good. Can you please just write me an erotica short story?
Okay.
Which is exactly the same as a regular short story, except the point of the climax is the climax. And actually, erotica is very difficult to write because I have written one full-length novel. Because in a regular novel, the idea is that the point of the scene is that something is revealed or something is hidden or something is discovered to move the plot forward. In erotica, you have to do all of that and they bone.
And that has to fit in without taking away from the...
Yeah, so you have to have that character revelation while they're screwing. Or you have, like, the plotting is hard on something like that. Forgive the pun. Anyway, so I wrote the short story. And she said, do you want this published under your name or do you want it under a pseudonym? You've got that YA book coming out. And I said, well, let's do a pseudonym. I don't know. My childhood pet in the street I grew up on.
Okay.
So that's what it is.
There you go.
Yeah. And then she messaged me again and she's like, I've got another gap. Can you write me another story? And I said, sure. And then another editor reached out to me and said, oh, I hear that you're really good at writing to spec. Can you write me a short story? And I said, okay. And suddenly I had enough short stories to do a collection. So I put together the Naughty and Nice collection. Yeah. And then I was like, I bet I could write a novel series. I bet I could do this. So just for fun, I wrote an erotica novel and again, signed it with that same editor. She was working with a different press. Right. Now, unfortunately, it had been planned to be a trilogy and that never ended up happening. But yeah, so there's that brief moment of time where I was writing as J.M. Frey, but I was paying my bills as Peggy Barnett.
Wow. There you go. Well, I guess that does make sense for choosing a pseudonym then, to make sure your books didn't fall into the wrong hands. So
yeah, I would have hated for some kid who loved the Skylarks saga to Google me,
pick it up,
and pick up Lips Like Ice, not knowing that it's hardcore alien peen.
Well, that explains that. Why don't you tell me one change that has had the most profound impact on your writing? I think you've already alluded to some of the changes, but is there something that you could say, this changed the direction of my work?
The industry has become a lot more difficult to break into because it's become a lot easier to break into. Back when I was starting, you had to print out the manuscript. You had to have an agent. Self-publishing didn't exist. You had to go buy the book of agents' addresses at the bookstore every year.
Yeah.
It was querying was significantly more lugubrious and ponderous and expensive. And I'm pleased as hell, don't get me wrong, that all these websites exist now, that people in lower socioeconomic positions, people who have been denied seats at the table, people who have been shut out, people who have been othered, they have access now. I'm thrilled by that. I'm absolutely thrilled by that. But it means there's way more competition.
Fair. Yeah.
Which means agents and editors are way more picky. And because my work is not easily packageable, it has made me way less appealing to people. So people before who might have said, I'll take a chance on this, even though it's genre blendy and it's weird, I'll take a chance on it, are now just outright saying, no, I can't package this easily. I can't fit it into an easy box. I don't know what to do with it. I'm just going to move on to somebody else who writes equally well, but writes something that is more saleable.
Yeah.
And you would think that what I'm about to say next is that it's changed me and I write a lot more middle of the road stuff, but it's actually
Right.
the opposite. It's
Okay.
incentivized me to go even further into the genre blending, to go even weirder, to go even more into contemporary with historical voice or historicals with a contemporary voice, or choosing the wrong narrator on purpose, or because the only thing that's setting me apart from anyone else doing what I'm doing is the fact that I'm writing it. So
Yeah.
I have really doubled down on J.M. Frey and
Okay.
her voice and her brand. My second agent and I parted ways at the beginning of the lockdown,
Right.
amicably. But it was that thing where I just was not producing something that she knew how to sell.
Right.
And we talked about it. And it's basically like, she's like, I don't know what to do with you. And I said, okay, then I'm going to go. Because an agent who is not walking with you down the path is standing in your way.
Yeah.
They're either guiding you or they're walking with you or they're blocking the path.
Yeah.
So we parted ways. That's fine. And I wrote the most J.M. Frey story I possibly could. It's set in Canada. It's queer as hell. It's political. It's historical, but it's contemporary. It's about settler accountability and colonization, but it's actually really about coffee beans, and it's a very very J.M. Frey book. I couldn't until the word romantasy was coined about a year and a half ago. I didn't
Right.
even know how
Right.
to explain it to people. Now I say it's a contemporary romantasy because at least that word exists.
Right. Right.
But I'm nearing on 340 rejections for this book, both small presses and agents, because
Because you don't fall under the.
it's not easily packageable.
Yeah.
And I was devastated, when I hit 100, when I hit 30, I was heartbroken. When I hit 100, I bought a cake. When I hit 200, I ate the second half of that cake because I had put half of it in the freezer.
Frozen. Yeah.
When I hit 300, my friends and I went out for a party. Like, you have to have a sense of humor about it because, and the thing is, it's a good book. Everybody who reads it says it's a good book. Talking about the best thing I've ever written, I think this is the best thing I've ever written.
Wow.
But it's not easily marketable. It's not easily packageable. It's not hitting the zeitgeist the way I want it to. Dragons are big right now. There's a dragon in the book. So I put out another 10 queries this weekend because I was like, well, dragons are big. Maybe now it'll hit.
Yeah.
And I'm not miserable about it. But what it has changed in me is my commitment to my own voice.
Right.
I'm going to tell the stories that I want to tell because trying to fit the mold didn't work. Writing those YA books, I'm very proud of them, but they made me miserable.
Yeah. Why do it if it's not what you want
Yeah.
to do? Yeah.
So I would rather not sell a book that I adore than struggle to write a book that I don't want to. So yeah, I've got the last set of queries out, and if these queries don't do anything, then I'm going to learn something new, and I'm going to self-publish it.
Self-publish. So that's what, as you're going through your story, I'm like, well, at what point do you choose to say, okay, enough is enough. I've tried, and you've tried harder than I would say many authors would try. Why not just self-publish? It's your name is out there. A lot you already have readership. Why not self-publish and use that?
Now I can. The thing
Yeah.
is, if I had tried to self-publish this so I wrote this book in 2019.
Right.
And parted ways with my agent in 2020. So she never even saw the book. I was only a third of the way through writing it. So I wrote the book in 2019 through 2020.
Sure.
Started pitching it around 2021. I didn't have this Wattpad Penguin Random House deal. So if I had self-published it, I would have had to spend a fortune on marketing.
Gotcha.
So, and I'm broke. I'm a starving artist. I'm a writer whose backup job is acting. Are you kidding? So I couldn't afford to do it the way I wanted to do it. And then out of nowhere in 2022, I got contacted by W by Wattpad.
Right.
And now suddenly I have a book with being distributed by one of the big five. So that has knocked, I don't know, $1,000 off my marketing budget.
Right.
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 So now it feels like, so before I was doing it, I wanted to publish it trad because I can't afford to pay an editor. I
Fair.
can't afford to pay a cover designer. And I wanted to do it right or not at all.
Fair.
But now that I have this Big Five distribution deal with Big Five marketing money and has been named in the New York Times, and I'm doing all these podcasts. Hi, thank you. That has now knocked my budget down by thousands of dollars. So now is the appropriate time from a marketing standpoint to self-publish it, because I can ride the coattails of everything that Time and Tide is doing. To be Machiavellian about it.
Good for you, and lucky for you that it happened that way. But
it doesn't for everybody, and I'm aware of my privilege.
Yeah, well, I think you earned it with your perseverance. I don't know many who could have hung on that long, right?
Yeah. Well, and I have lots of books that are finished and are rotting on my hard drive.
Well, looking at your website, you have already, a number of books. Granted, some are under a pseudonym, but you have a number of books already. So you're not just a one and done type of an author, I don't think so.
I enjoy doing it very much. I would enjoy it more if I made more money and I didn't have to have 3 jobs. But I enjoy doing it. Again, it goes back to doing the fan fiction, right? I still write stories for fun.
Right. Yeah. And as long as all the stress and strain of trying to get published doesn't take the fun away, then I guess you'll continue to do it, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it does.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going through a period right now where I'm like, do I even bother writing another book?
Why are you? Yeah. Why are you doing this?
I have 2 completed books rotting on my hard drive. I've got this dragon book that I can't sell.
Yeah.
I have no guarantee that my publisher is going to take the next book I write, even though they've explicitly said we'd love for this next book to exist.
Yeah.
I haven't signed anything. So there's no, and this is not me calling them out. This is how the industry works.
Sure.
Until a publisher has a complete manuscript in their hand and it fits exactly what they want, they will not agree to publish it. Doesn't matter how much work you put into it.
Fair.
So the question is, do I have the time and energy right now to write another book that maybe won't sell? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I am burnt out as heck.
I think if I am probably not the right guy to be given advice in that I'm not a published author, but maybe you ride on the coattails of Time and Tide, self-publish your 2 or 3. It's not a hard process to self-publish.
Oh no, I could have it done an hour from now if I wanted to.
Yeah, right. And I understand that you have certain expectations and you're holding yourself to a certain level, but maybe you take 1 or you take 2 or the 2 that are rotting on your hard drive, as you say. Take those and say, you know what, screw this. I'm going to self-publish, ride the coattails of Time and Tide. Your name is going to be out there, is already out there, and just make enough to at least get you re-energized, because it sounds like you're at a point where it's like, I may need to take some time.
But if we're talking about just as a career standpoint, or I wait until my publisher is open for Next Works, because my publisher doesn't want to look at Next Works until 6 months after publication, and that's this May.
And that's kind of normal, is it, for the industry?
No. 6 months is a very long time. So most contracts have something called a right of first refusal, which means you are signing to us the right to say yay or nay to whatever you make next.
Gotcha.
And most publishers will, within a month, basically, of signing this thing, say, okay, what else have you got? In which case,
because you're not packaged exactly the way most
Yeah.
writers are. They want to give it an extra
Well,
bit of
no,
time.
it's just standard for 6 months for this publisher. This particular publisher that I'm working with, W by
Yeah.
Wattpad, 6 months is
Yeah.
standard for them.
Okay, so
Everybody's
standard for them, not
contract
standard in the
is 6
industry.
months, but it's
Okay.
not standard in the industry. So in the
Okay.
industry, the reason is, imagine you sign somebody. Imagine you sign the next Stephen King.
Yeah.
And you don't exercise right of first refusal. And he becomes the biggest selling author in the world. And you don't own anything else by him.
Yeah.
He can now go to literally any other publisher and make 5 times the money.
Right,
and you'll get
of
outbid
course.
at the book auction and you're effed.
Yeah.
So a lot of the reason that publishers want right of first refusal on other works is because they want to lock you down.
Fair. Okay.
If you're successful, they want to own you. They want to own whatever you do next.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, not in a negative way, just in a business way.
Yeah.
So when I signed this contract, I expected that I was going to show them these 2 books and then probably a pitch package. And a pitch package is back cover copy, title, character breakdown, full synopsis of the plot in the first 3 to 5 chapters. So they
Okay.
get the taste of the voice.
Yeah.
But this particular publisher has chosen to refuse to look at next works
For 6
until 6 months out. So those 2 books that I have rotting on my hard drive, I'm legally obligated to not self-publish them. I have
So
to
they-
wait
So they
for
own
my
you
publisher.
still. Yeah.
I have to wait for my publisher to say no because they have the right of first refusal.
Okay. Well.
Yeah.
I guess. And you said that was when? May?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have to wait till May. I will submit them. They will either like them or not. If they like them, great. I don't have to pay for the editor. I don't have to pay for the marketing. I don't have to pay for the cover design. Look at all that money I just saved. And
Right.
and there are people who are like, I could never publish traditionally because, for a $20 book, you only make $2. And I'm like, that's true. But if I self-published, I would be making for a $20 book $17 or $15. But I spent $500 on the cover. I spent $5,000 on the editing and the typesetting. For that $2 that I make, I don't mind because I'm getting the best editor in the industry, whom I could never afford otherwise.
Fair. Okay. It's a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're the first one to share more of the inside of the industry.
Yeah. And I don't think these are deep secrets. It's just stuff that people don't talk about.
Maybe it's a little stressful right now, but hey, you know what? Maybe in May
it's only stressful because normally publishers say, we'll look at the pitch package, but this publisher is like, now we're only really interested in finished books. So now I'm like, oh no, I have from now until May to finish a whole new book.
Right. Okay.
So buy my book is the point of all of this. Everybody go out and buy my book, please.
Time and Tide, available everywhere. After all this time, it's available everywhere.
Yeah. And I have more news coming about Time and Tide, but I haven't signed the deal memo yet, so I can't say anything.
You know what? You'll share that with me and I'll share it with our listeners down the road.
Yes.
Or maybe we'll have you back and we'll talk some more.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I get to announce it in the next couple weeks. That would be great.
Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
Can you tell me just a little bit about your writing process, your routines, what time of day do you like to write? What tools do you use? Just give me a little bit more overview of your writing.
If I had my way, if I didn't have my day job, it would be getting up in the morning, having a pot of coffee, taking care of correspondence, and then writing for a couple of hours around, noon to 3 or 4 o'clock, and not trying to do marathon sessions. But because I do have the day job, I try to write at least 500 words during my lunch break at work.
Oh, wow.
And then if I'm incentivized to keep going when I get home, do that. Try to do 1,000 or so words on the weekend. Try to jam it in wherever I can. But ideally, for the couple of years where I was a full-time writer, I miss those days. It was sleep late, have a good breakfast, fuel my brain, fuel my body, just sit down and write for 3 or 4 hours straight, get up, go for a walk, have dinner. And then if I felt like it, go back to the writing, but I would never force myself to it.
Okay.
So ideally, that's what I would like. And then if you can think about shifting that entire routine up about 6 hours, I'm actually definitely a night owl. I would rather work all night when the rest of the world is silent and go
Right.
to bed at dawn. But that's not the way our society is structured.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately, if
yeah.
you could do that if you were writing full time and chose to do that as well, but
Yeah.
because of your
Yeah.
full time job, you can't.
Yeah, I can't. In terms of tools, I adore Scrivener.
Okay.
I started writing in Microsoft Word because that's what we all had, or Notepad,
Right.
actually, I think on Microsoft Notepad.
Yeah.
And when Scrivener was released, I was quite excited about it because it lets you jump. This was before the navigation pane existed in
Okay.
Word. So
Yeah.
it let you jump between chapters and it lets you take out entire pieces and move them somewhere else. And I do not write in order. I barely outline. I generally write like the first couple chapters and then like the climax of the book.
Yeah.
Not the denouement, but like the ending of the book. And I always say, I need to know where the target is before I draw my bow.
Right. Right.
But I jump around constantly, especially with stuff where I'm like, okay, so this is in this scene, and we're going to set up that the character is missing the winding key for her father's fob watch. Okay, we've said, you know what? I'm going to go write that right now. So then I jump ahead and I write the scene where the key is brought up again, and then I jump ahead and so if we're talking about in terms of playwriting, I write all the Chekhov gun moments.
Yeah.
And then I go back and write the story.
Wow.
So I jump around like a crazy person. And eventually the whole story gets told. Eventually I'll
Right.
go back and be like, okay, this is the version where I go in and I fill in everything that's missing, all the connective tissue. But by then I've written all the major scenes, all the most important things, making sure all the foreshadowing connects together, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I write like a jigsaw puzzle.
Interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has their style, and whatever works for you, good,
Yeah.
right? But
So God bless Scrivener and its ability to just move
okay.
chunks around wholesale.
Yeah, yeah. Is Scrivener a one-time payment, or is that like a subscription?
It's one-time payment, or
Okay.
it was the last time I paid for it. I think it's $40 for 3 devices.
Okay.
But the only thing that I wish that they had, which they don't, is a cloud version. So
Right. Oh,
I wish
okay.
they had an online version, because then I could work on the software on my computer and then on my lunch break, close my office door and work on
Use
that
your phone.
exact manuscript through a
Yeah.
website. And instead I have to carry a USB key back and forth to work,
Oh, wow.
which
Okay.
when those things get corrupted, Ruth from Literature and Lattes. Ruth, I don't know if you've read the acknowledgments of Time and Tide, but you are in the acknowledgments of Time and Tide for getting that draft back for me. It was
Oh, boy.
corrupted. I got to work one day, it was corrupted, and I had not backed it up the night before, and I was screwed. And I emailed Literature and Lattes, which is the company that makes Scrivener,
Yeah.
literally tears streaming down my face. And the most amazing woman fixed it and sent it back to me.
Wow. Well, that's almost archaic now, not having cloud backup, right? But that
Yeah.
explains why it's a one-time payment as well. Maybe they'll eventually flip to
Yeah,
to have an
I'd be
online
willing
backup.
to pay a subscription fee to have Scrivener
Yeah,
in the cloud. I'd rather not, because it drives me bananas that we live in a world where you don't own what you buy anymore.
absolutely. I agree.
Especially this whole not owning the books you buy on Kindle. How unethical.
Right.
And I was speaking with someone the other day. They said, I don't understand why that matters. And I said, because they can reach into your Kindle and delete a book. So if Jeff Bezos decides to bow to the whims of the current American administration and decides that any book that doesn't fit the current populist fascist regime should be banned, they can go into your book and take away your copy that you bought of To Kill a Mockingbird, of The Hate You Give, of The Trevor Project, of Red, White, and Royal Blue. It's terrifying. But I love Scrivener anyway. It's a great program.
Good to know. I've heard a few people use it. I use I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Campfire. It's cloud based, and it has modules, and it links characters with scenes, with world building. It has different databases, I guess you'll say.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff sounds really interesting, but I think Scrivener kind of came first for me. And I'm an old stick in the mud. I'm an absolute grouch, and I hate having to learn yet another platform, yet another software.
Well,
which
and
is
if
why
it works for you, why change it?
Yeah, I'd love to have the cloud version of it, and Campfire sounds great, but I already have Scrivener.
Yeah.
And it's the same way where people are like, well, you don't have to use Ingram Spark to self-publish anymore. And I'm like, I already have an account.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. Once you're there, why have, I tried 3 or 4 different programs before. I mean, I've tried Readsy, which is free, right? That's online. I've used Word, but I don't subscribe to Microsoft Office. So anyway, long and short, once I started using Campfire, that's what I use, and I have a hard time switching from it as well.
Yeah, that's just what you like. And I mean, the nice thing about Scrivener is that it's very basic. Yeah. And I don't think we're going to get these AI assistants shoved in our faces on Scrivener.
Right. How do you stay connected with your audience? You've got a beautiful webpage there. Are you huge into social media?
I try to be huge into social media. I do try to make a point of having a separation between Jessica Frey, me, and JM Frey, the persona. So when you follow me on social media, you are following JM Frey. So I do try to talk about my books, and the other thing I do is I try to share the knowledge, the industry knowledge that I have. So I have an article series called Words for Writers. And I don't put it out regularly because it's based on when I get questions. So if you have a question, if something I've said on this podcast is like, wait a minute, I want this aspect of things to be explained better.
A little clearer, yeah.
Ask me. I'll write an article. I have over 100 free articles on my website. Because first off, a rising tide lifts all boats. But secondly, there were people in this industry who were several rungs up the ladder above me who reached down and helped me up. And now it's my turn to reach down and help other people. So I'm very happy to share information. So long as I'm not violating an NDA, I will tell you what this business is like. And so that's what my social media is. A lot of updates on my books, a lot of updates on what's out where and my next appearances, but then answering questions for people.
Awesome. And what is your handle on social media? Do you have the same one, just JM Frey, or is it?
Yeah. At j.m.frey across all social media.
All platforms.
I'm no longer on X, but I am on pretty much everything else.
Okay. Good to know. And your website is also jmfrey.net.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's getting a refresh soon. I'm delighted that you said it's wonderfully done. My friend Karen did that for me. Okay. And a couple of months ago, Karen was like, "Well, I don't like it anymore. I'm going to do a new one." And I said, "Okay, but can you wait till Time and Tide's out? Because I can't afford to have my website down while my book is out." And she was like, "Yeah." So I don't know what she's doing. She does whatever she wants. It's her personal hobby, and I enjoy that my website is her personal hobby.
Yeah, you should. There's a lot of information there. So
yeah, she's very good at what she does. I'm very lucky to have her as a friend.
Does she do it professionally, or is this just literally a hobby for her that she does in her spare time?
She used to do it professionally, but I think I'm technically her only client now.
Okay, so let's look ahead here. Tell us what 2025 looks like for you.
Well, in May, I have 2 books on my hard drive that I'm going to submit to my current publisher to see if they're interested. I'm also racing against the deadline to try to finish a 3rd book because there is a book a fake book called The Welshman's Daughters that is written by the fake author Margaret Goodenough in Time and Tide. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, I went to the library and I was looking for Margaret Goodenough's The Welshman's Daughters, but nobody's heard of it, which is very flattering. But babes, I made her up. So I'm trying to write The Welshman's Daughters now. I'm going to admit, I don't know if I'll succeed. I really shot myself in the foot with this one because Margaret writes in a style that I don't. She writes early, original Gothic fiction, Gothic romance, not the Gothic romance the way we know it now. She's writing this book in 1805. She's writing Anne Radcliffe. She's writing Udolpho. She's writing The Monk. She's writing The Italian. I don't know these books. I don't know this genre. This isn't what I do. So I'm spending a lot of time watching YouTube videos and talking with my friends who have read these books. And like, these are all the books that Kathy Morland is reading in Northanger Abbey. So I'm trying to recreate that kind of book, not what we consider Gothic romance today. I'm not doing Crimson Peak. I'm doing what Crimson Peak is based on. So I'm trying to write that. And then I have those 2 other books to pitch them, and we'll see if they want them. And then I've got this dragon book that I'm still waiting. Hopefully, I mean, fingers crossed, this last batch of queries brings me some good news. But if it doesn't, then I'm probably going to try to self-publish this book by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, once May comes and goes, I guess you can certainly start making some decisions on self-publishing. Maybe it's something new that you will learn.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Time and Tide is doing well for you, so.
Yes, yeah. And I've met some wonderful people in the self-publishing community here in Toronto. I'm actually speaking at the Toronto Indie Authors Conference in April. I'm doing a craft workshop on the craft of world building, using the textbook that I published a couple of years ago. But I, in return, am going to sit in on every business panel I possibly can, because I don't know much about the business of indie publishing. So I'm quite excited to be going to this, not just to be a speaker, but also to learn things.
Yeah, that's a great place to end here. That's what this podcast is for. Take the knowledge that you can learn. You're talking about these meetings that you're going to go to, and take the information that all these people are willing to share, which I appreciate you sharing all the stuff today. A lot of information that I was not aware of. So,
it's not a secretive industry, but there's so much that happens in the back end that people just don't talk about. And there's assumptions. Again, having been in film and theater and an actor, I'm used to those as well. The way people say to you, well, you should just do this for your career. And I feel some part of my soul shrivel up because I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. So I don't actually mind talking about it, because I would much rather people go into this clear-headed and knowledgeable so they can protect their own hearts. Because I've been doing this for 2 decades and I've been an actor for 4. So I have seen people get their hearts broken, get taken advantage of, take advantage of other people, do something that absolutely blacklisted them and destroyed their career forever, not even realizing they'd made an error. I would much rather that everybody understand what it is, because there's so many people out there who want to be actors and so many people out there who want to be writers. And I want to help you do that in the kindest, wisest, most thoughtful way possible.
Awesome. Well, you did a little bit in that today, and Words for Writers is also available to help us as writers learn so much more. jmfrey.net, that's Frey, and at j.m.frey on social media.
Yeah, nice and easy.
Jess, appreciate you coming on the show. You've shared so much today. I appreciate you doing that for us.
Thank you for inviting me on, Keith. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome, and let's talk again sometime.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Head over to brewingfictionpodcast.com. I invite you to explore my author page for details on my debut publication, Short Not Sweet. This collection of microfiction offers bite-sized tales encompassing classic vampire, werewolf, and witch tropes, alongside stories exploring the darker aspects of humanity, and it is available in ebook or paperback. And if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe to the podcast to be notified when the latest episode is released. Thanks for listening. Cheers.